It was a routine bureaucratic process. The Galactic Classification Bureau, seated in the heart of the Confederation's vast administrative network, had been responsible for evaluating countless species across the galaxy. Their task: assign a designation to each new discovery based on its abilities, physical traits, and potential threat level. When humanity was first encountered, the decision-makers barely hesitated. Primitive spaceflight, limited technology compared to the other civilizations, and no apparent psychic abilities, their fate was sealed quickly. The humans were labeled as prey. Tathral, an elder of the Arak species and one of the Bureau's senior advisors, reviewed the file with mild interest. His 4 eyes flicked over the humans' biological data, noting their fragile bone structure and lack of natural defenses. He snorted, a low guttural sound that vibrated through his elongated chest. "Prey," he muttered, adding his signature to the decision. The Arak, a race bred from apex predators, had long dominated their part of the galaxy, and they found the idea of a prey species being anything but weak laughable. Still, curiosity lingered. This new prey species had developed space travel, albeit rudimentary, and they had spread across their solar system. For a race without claws, fangs, or advanced weaponry, it was an odd leap. Perhaps they are clever. Tathral mused to himself, but cunning alone wasn't enough. If that were the case, many small scavenger species would have risen to power ages ago. No, humans, despite their technological toys, lacked the true essence of survival in the eyes of the Arak. They lacked the predatory instinct that defined the galaxy's apex species. Across the vast Confederation, the classification of humanity as prey passed without much notice. The dominant species, the Yalathi, Vasir, and even the analytical Xylar, all accepted it as standard. A few murmurs of interest rose within certain circles, those intrigued by the anomaly of a prey species achieving spacefaring status, but they were dismissed as inconsequential. After all, what threat could they possibly pose? None had any reason to doubt the judgment of the Bureau, nor the long-standing wisdom of the Arak. It wasn't long before the message was disseminated across the interstellar networks. Humanity was cataloged, labeled, and filed away. In the eyes of the Confederation, they were no different from the dozens of other prey species that had been identified over the centuries. But some took the classification as more than a mere label. To the Arak, a species labeled as prey represented an opportunity, the thrill of the hunt. And so the stage was set. Unseen by humanity, which continued its expansion across the stars, there was already a quiet hum of interest from the hunting circles of the galaxy. Predators like the Arak, ever eager to prove their dominance, began making plans. Earth, this planet of fragile prey, would be an ideal hunting ground. The challenge was minor, the rewards negligible, but the prestige of conquering a new species was enough to spark excitement. In their arrogance, none of them asked a critical question. None of them wondered what might happen if this so-called prey was not what they seemed. Tathral leaned back in his chamber, looking out over the vast cityscape of the Arak homeworld. The hunt would be announced soon, and those worthy of it would travel to Earth to claim their trophies. It would be glorious, he thought, a demonstration of nature's order. But as he gazed into the endless void, something unsettled flickered in the back of his mind. A memory, perhaps, of ancient hunts that didn't go as planned. He shook it off. What could a fragile species like humanity possibly do? In the far reaches of space, the hunters began to prepare. The Arak hunting vessel, Vrakta, broke through the edge of Earth's atmosphere with a silent grace, its black hull absorbing the light of the distant sun. On board, the hunters prepared for what they assumed would be a brief and effortless pursuit. Leading the group was Zikral, a seasoned hunter with over 100 confirmed kills, each one a trophy displayed on his armor, reminders of the countless prey species he had bested. His mandibles clicked softly as he looked over the verdant planet below. "They call this world Earth," he growled, his voice tinged with disdain. "A planet of prey, just like all the others." Beside him, Vrathik, his second-in-command, glanced at the live readings from the surface. No psionic defenses detected. Their electromagnetic technology is crude. They still use projectile weapons. He paused, his voice curling with amusement. "It will be easy." Zikral nodded. "Prepare the landing parties. We'll take trophies from their strongest first, a show of dominance." The hunters began their descent, cloaked in their advanced stealth fields, invisible to the human detection systems. They split into groups, spreading out across various regions of Earth. Their mission was clear: capture, subjugate, and bring back living specimens as proof of their conquest. The humans would be hunted like game. Zikaral's pod landed in a dense forest somewhere in what the humans called the Pacific Northwest. He stepped out into the cool air, his sensory organs flaring to life as they detected the movement of prey nearby. It was almost disappointing how easy it would be. These humans had no idea what was coming. They were weak, soft, fragile. It would be over before it even began. He moved silently through the trees, his hunting party following close behind. As they approached the edge of a small human settlement, Zikaral activated his cloaking field, turning invisible to the naked eye. The thrill of the hunt surged through him as he scanned the area. Small wooden structures, crude vehicles, and scattered humans going about their daily lives, oblivious to the predators in their midst. Zikaral clicked his mandibles again. Begin the hunt. Vrothik and the others spread out, positioning themselves for ambush. Zikaral stalked closer to a group of humans, his eyes fixed on his first target. A man stood near the edge of the forest, his back turned. Zikaral moved with the precision of a shadow, ready to strike. But just as he prepared to leap, the man turned, and their eyes locked. For a brief moment, there was confusion on the human's face, as if he sensed something wrong. Zikaral didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, expecting an easy kill, but something unexpected happened. The man reacted faster than any prey he had ever encountered. With a shout, the human dove to the side, avoiding Zikaral's lethal strike. In an instant, he was up again, pulling a small object from his side, a gun. What? The shot rang out, a deafening explosion that echoed through the trees. Zikaral stumbled back, his armor deflecting the projectile, but the force of the impact surprised him. The human had fought back, and worse, he had struck with deadly precision. Before Zikaral could react, the human shouted something in his primitive language, and suddenly the air was filled with noise and movement. The settlement came alive. More humans appeared, some armed, others shouting into devices Zikaral didn't recognize. Within moments, chaos erupted. The humans weren't fleeing in terror as expected. They were organizing. Weapons were drawn, and the air filled with gunfire. Zikaral felt a second shot hit him, this time piercing the softer material between his armor plates. Pain flared through his body as he staggered back into the trees, his cloaking device flickering. This isn't right. Vrothik's voice crackled through the comms. They're not running. They're fighting back. Zikaral snarled in frustration. How could this be happening? The humans were supposed to be prey, weak and cowardly, yet here they were, standing their ground, their primitive weapons cutting through his team with alarming efficiency. He had seen this only once before, long ago, on a different world, with a different prey species that had refused to go down easily. But those had been warriors. These were supposed to be civilians, no different from the countless other prey species they had hunted. Suddenly, the tables turned. The hunters became the hunted. One by one, Zikaral's team was picked off, their advanced technology offering little protection against the sheer will and ferocity of the humans. The forest echoed with the sounds of battle, gunfire, alien screams, and the relentless advance of human forces. Zikaral stumbled through the underbrush, bleeding and disoriented. His HUD blinked warnings of critical damage. This was supposed to be a simple hunt, a show of dominance. But instead, it had become a desperate fight for survival. He reached the clearing where his pod had landed, gasping for breath. Behind him, the sounds of the humans grew louder. They were coming, relentless, unstoppable. His fingers fumbled as he activated the emergency beacon. The rest of his hunting party had either fallen or retreated. There was no time to regroup. His ship's AI responded quickly, the familiar hum of the engines roaring to life as the extraction sequence began. As the ship ascended back into the atmosphere, Zikaral collapsed into the pilot's seat, clutching his wound. His mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just happened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The humans had fought back, and worse, they had won. "What are they?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. But he already knew the answer. Deep down, in the core of his being, these humans weren't like the other prey species. They were something else entirely, something dangerous. For the first time in his life, Zikral felt the cold touch of fear, and back on Earth, the humans stood victorious over the bodies of their would-be hunters, unaware that this was only the beginning. The initial reports from the Pacific Northwest arrived at government and military offices across the globe with a mix of confusion and disbelief. Several mysterious deaths, all marked by odd wounds and missing body parts, quickly gained attention. There was something unusual about these incidents, something that didn't fit the profile of any known human attack. Colonel David Callan sat in his office, scrolling through the preliminary reports. He had seen strange things in his years with military intelligence, but nothing quite like this. The descriptions of cloaked attackers, advanced weaponry, and the seemingly effortless slaughter of highly trained personnel were alarming. But what truly grabbed his attention was the aftermath, how local civilians had managed to turn the tide. Ordinary people, with nothing but hunting rifles and grit, had repelled something alien. Are you telling me civilians killed them? Callan asked sharply, turning to his aide. Yes, sir. They caught the attackers off guard, the aide responded, her voice laced with astonishment. It seems like the enemy didn't expect any resistance. Callan leaned back, his mind racing. The enemy hadn't just underestimated military forces, they had underestimated everyone. Get me a full situation report. I want to know everything. Meanwhile, across Earth, the pattern repeated itself. In remote areas, alien hunters descended, confident in their superiority, only to find themselves faced with a species that didn't cower or flee. Initial surprise gave way to organized retaliation. From rural backwaters to urban environments, humanity responded with an unyielding tenacity. In one instance, a hunting party that had landed in a densely populated city found themselves outmatched in a matter of hours. The local authorities, who initially thought they were dealing with a localized terrorist threat, quickly adapted to the strange circumstances. Law enforcement deployed SWAT teams, only to find their advanced gear struggling against the alien technology. However, what the aliens didn't account for was human adaptability. Within hours, makeshift defense strategies emerged, targeting weak points in the enemy's cloaking devices, exploiting gaps in their armor, and using terrain to outmaneuver the hunters. In another corner of the planet, deep within the South American jungles, the Iraq encountered guerrilla fighters, people accustomed to living in harsh conditions and waging wars in the most unforgiving environments. The aliens thought they had the advantage with their cloaking technology and superior physical prowess, but they didn't understand the humans' relentless, almost primal ability to turn any environment into a battlefield. Within days, the hunters became the hunted, their sleek black armor no match for traps, ambushes, and the savage ingenuity of the humans they pursued. The speed of the human response was overwhelming. Within a week of the first encounter, militaries across the globe were coordinating efforts to identify and neutralize the alien threats. Scientists and engineers scrambled to analyze alien technology, finding ways to reverse engineer some of the devices that had been left behind in the chaos. The aliens had come to hunt, but they hadn't prepared for a species that would so quickly adapt and overcome. In an underground military complex somewhere in the United States, Colonel Callan stood in front of a digital display showing satellite images of alien vessels fleeing the planet. They're pulling back, he observed, his voice calm but edged with anticipation. Why? Someone asked from the back of the room. Callan crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing at the screen. Because they know they've lost the element of surprise, and because we're more dangerous than they thought. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were learning. Each encounter with the alien hunters provided new insights into their tactics and weaknesses. Reports began flooding in of successful counterattacks where humans had not only survived, but decisively won. With every victory, humanity grew more confident and more aggressive. In Europe, a joint task force of elite soldiers and intelligence operatives tracked an Iraq hunting vessel that had crash-landed after a botched attack. Moving swiftly through the dark forests of Eastern Europe, they descended on the remaining hunters, eliminating them in close-quarters combat. One of the operatives, an ex-Special Forces officer named Kazimierz Dragunov, recounted the fight afterward with a grim satisfaction. "They thought they were invisible, but we saw them," he said, wiping blood from his face. "They bled, same as anyone else." Across the globe, a new kind of war had begun. But it wasn't just fought by governments or military forces. It was civilians, engineers, hackers, and ordinary people who were turning the tide. An unexpected alliance of humanity was forming, not through formal treaties or declarations of war, but through a shared instinct. Something ancient, buried deep in the human psyche, had awakened, a fury that no alien classification system had accounted for. Meanwhile, in the darkened control room of the Confederation's central hub, the higher-ranking officials of the Galactic Classification Bureau sat in stunned silence. Reports from the first wave of the Iraq hunters had started trickling back. Those few who survived the initial expeditions spoke of something terrifying. Not just that the humans had fought back, but that they had adapted with shocking speed. "They shouldn't have been able to fight us," Tathral muttered, his voice a mix of disbelief and frustration. He had reviewed the files again and again. The humans weren't genetically modified super soldiers. They weren't using any form of advanced psychic warfare. They were just humans. "But they're not acting like prey," Vrothik said quietly, his tone edged with something darker. "Fear? No, it couldn't be. They were classified wrong," someone else in the room whispered, though the words barely reached anyone's ears. No one responded. Back on Earth, Colonel Callan and his team had just completed their final debriefing for the day. The attacks had slowed, but everyone knew it wasn't over. The aliens would return. "They'll come back," Callan said, pacing in front of the small group gathered in the war room. "But next time, we'll be ready for them." The truth had become impossible to ignore. The hunters had come to Earth expecting a simple victory. They had come looking for trophies, expecting to hunt prey. But they had made a critical mistake. They didn't realize that when humanity was threatened, it didn't run. It didn't hide. It evolved. Zikral watched in silent horror as the tactical display flickered on the screen before him. It had been weeks since the first hunt on Earth, and the reports coming back from his fellow hunters were worse than he could have imagined. His clan's once proud reputation as the galaxy's ultimate predators was crumbling. The Arak had faced resistance before, but never anything like this. Never a species so relentless, so impossibly capable of turning the tables so quickly. The humans. The word echoed in his mind as he replayed the transmissions from the failed hunting expeditions. What began as the arrogance of a superior hunter stalking a new species had devolved into something far more terrifying. The hunters were being hunted. Zikral's vessel, one of the few still orbiting Earth, was now cut off from the rest of the Confederation. Human forces had begun to launch counterattacks into space, targeting their ships with crude yet effective ballistic weapons. Worse, they had learned how to bypass the Arak's once impenetrable cloaking technology. The ship was constantly bombarded with signals, probes, and attacks from Earth-based hackers who had managed to infiltrate even their most secure systems. "Commander Zikral, we have lost contact with the Zorath and the Grathkal," Vrothik reported, his voice hollow, stripped of the once unshakable confidence. "They were both destroyed in the lower atmosphere. Ground-based weapons. The humans must have reverse-engineered our shields." Zikral clenched his fists, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. His breathing was shallow, his muscles tense. He hadn't expected to face defeat like this. The hunt had gone so wrong, so quickly. It was beyond comprehension. "How are they doing this?" Zikral growled, turning sharply toward Vrothik. "They were labeled prey." Vrothik stood silently, his eyes fixed on the floor. He had no answer. The truth was simple, yet terrifying. The humans had not just adapted, they had evolved faster than any species the Arak had ever encountered. What was supposed to be an effortless domination of a weak prey species had turned into a nightmare. For every victory the Arak had claimed in the first days of the hunt, the humans had responded with overwhelming force, learning from every engagement, turning each defeat into an opportunity to strike back harder, faster, and more lethally. On the surface of Earth, the remaining Arak hunters found themselves cornered. Once spread across the globe, stalking their prey with deadly precision, they now scrambled for survival. The humans had taken the fight to them, coordinating through global networks, using drones, satellites, and guerrilla tactics to track and eliminate the alien forces one by one. The Arak's advanced technology, once a source of pride, had become a glaring vulnerability. Their cloaking devices malfunctioned under the constant barrage of electromagnetic interference. Their communications were jammed, and their ships were falling from the sky, crippled by missiles and railguns that the humans had salvaged and repurposed from alien wreckage. In the heart of Africa, a team of Arak hunters had taken refuge in what they thought was a remote location, deep within a dense jungle. They underestimated the locals. For weeks, they had evaded human forces, but now they were being systematically hunted. The humans used the land against them, setting traps, ambushing them at night, and forcing the aliens to retreat deeper into the jungle. "I can't see them!" one of the hunters hissed into the comms, his voice a frantic rasp. His infrared sensors were malfunctioning, and the thick canopy above made it impossible to use their usual detection methods. "They're everywhere!" another voice echoed, this one shaking with fear. "They move in the shadows. They know where we are." A scream cut through the comm channel, and then silence. At the base of a large tree, a lone human crouched, his face smeared with mud and his rifle steady. He watched as the last of the Arak hunters moved past him, unaware of the trap that lay just ahead. With a calm, practiced movement, the human triggered the device he had set earlier, a makeshift bomb fashioned from scavenged alien tech. The explosion was deafening, and the ground trembled as the alien bodies were thrown into the air. The human stood, surveying the scene with cold detachment. There were no cheers, no celebration, only the grim satisfaction of victory in a battle that had become personal. Across the globe, similar stories played out. In the streets of cities, in the mountains, in the deserts, the humans fought back with everything they had. It wasn't just their military forces. Civilians, once frightened and confused, had become the true terror of the Arak. Every person, armed with whatever they could find, had become a soldier in this unplanned war. They fought with a ferocity that no alien could have predicted, their anger and survival instincts melding into one unstoppable force. On the ship, Zikral stared blankly at the tactical display. There was no point in denying it anymore. The humans had turned the tide, and the Arak were being wiped out. He had heard rumors spreading among the remaining hunters, rumors that the humans were no longer satisfied with defending their world. There were whispers that human forces were preparing to launch strikes into the very heart of the Arak Empire. And worse, they had the means to do it. Zikral's head lowered as he finally understood. Humanity was unlike any species they had ever encountered. Their classification as prey had been wrong, catastrophically wrong. This wasn't just about survival for the humans anymore. They had been provoked, and now they would do what they had always done. They would adapt, they would overcome, and they would dominate. Vrothik, Zikral's voice was cold, resigned. "Prepare the escape vessel." Vrothik blinked in confusion. "Commander?" Zikral's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the command room. "We cannot fight them here. Not like this. The hunt is over." As Vrothik hesitated, Zikral rose from his chair, towering over his subordinate. His voice carried the weight of finality and even fear. "If we stay, we die." And so, the once proud hunters fled. They abandoned Earth, their ships leaving trails of smoke and debris in the atmosphere as they retreated into space. What remained of the Arak forces was shattered, their pride broken, their confidence destroyed. For the first time in their history, they had met a foe they could not dominate, a species that had taken everything they knew about the natural order and turned it upside down. The Arak's empire, built on the bones of prey species across the galaxy, was beginning to crumble. And it had all started on a small, unassuming planet called Earth. In the aftermath of the Arak retreat, Earth was quiet. But it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the eerie calm that comes after a storm, when the survivors are left to understand what had happened. The once vibrant skies, scarred with debris from fallen alien ships, still buzzed with activity as humanity worked relentlessly, not only to rebuild, but to prepare for what would come next. Colonel David Callan stood on a hill overlooking one of the largest crash sites. Alien technology lay scattered across the ground, half buried in dirt and broken trees. Teams of engineers and scientists were already at work, carefully dissecting the remains of the Iraq vessels. They had learned so much in such a short time. Too much. The thought both excited and unsettled him. Humanity had done more than survive the hunt. They had thrived in the chaos, and now they were stronger than ever before. Callan's radio crackled, pulling him from his thoughts. "Sir, you're needed at HQ. We've decrypted the last of the Iraq transmissions." He exhaled slowly, his jaw tight. It wasn't over. They had won the battle, but everyone knew this was only the beginning of something much larger. The Iraq had fled, but their humiliation would not be forgotten. The Confederation would hear of this, and others would come. Perhaps not to hunt, but to destroy. The human race was no longer an obscure footnote in the galactic catalog of species. They had become something far more dangerous. As Callan made his way back to the command center, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Humanity had proven that it wouldn't be preyed upon, but at what cost? Reports were coming in from across the world. Governments were racing to militarize, alliances were forming, old rivalries were forgotten in the face of a common enemy. And still, in the hearts of the people, there was something deeper, something darker. The world had changed. There was no going back. In the small room that served as Earth's new intelligence hub, Callan was greeted by the sight of familiar faces. Soldiers, scientists, and strategists all gathered around a large holographic display. On it, the last fragments of the Iraq's communications scrolled in real time, freshly decrypted. They revealed something startling. The Iraq had not been acting alone. Far beyond the borders of the Confederation, another force had been watching. A far more advanced race. And they had taken note of humanity. "They weren't just here to hunt us for sport," Callan murmured as he scanned the reports. "They were testing us." At the far end of the table, Dr. Elise Reza, one of the lead scientists overseeing the alien technology research, nodded grimly. "The data we've recovered indicates that the Iraq weren't expecting to fail. But after their first wave of casualties, they sent a distress signal, asking for support. The Confederation never responded." Callan's brow furrowed. "Why?" Reza hesitated, her eyes darkening. "Because they were waiting to see what we would do, waiting to see what kind of species we really are." The room fell silent. It wasn't just a hunt, it was a test. The Iraq hadn't just come to claim trophies, they had come to provoke a response. And humanity had delivered one that sent shockwaves through the galaxy, a response that could never be ignored. "They know now," Reza continued, her voice quiet but firm. "They know we're not prey." The weight of those words hung in the air. It was a turning point, not just for Earth, but for the galaxy. Humanity had been underestimated, dismissed as fragile and insignificant, but in the heat of battle, they had revealed their true nature. The humans had something the other species lacked. An innate, primal ferocity that had been buried beneath centuries of civilization, but never extinguished. The Confederation had labeled them wrong. They weren't prey. They were predators, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with that truth. Outside, the world was moving at an accelerated pace. Factories that once produced consumer goods had shifted to military production. Civilian scientists had joined forces with military engineers, creating new weapons, faster ships, and stronger defenses. Earth had always been a planet of innovation, but now that innovation had turned to survival, and more dangerously, to domination. The Iraq's advanced technology had been stripped, reverse-engineered, and improved. What had once been the pride of the galaxy's apex predators now lay in human hands, repurposed into tools for a new kind of warfare. In the vastness of space, beyond human sensors, Zikral sat in the darkened chamber of his damaged warship, the remnants of his hunting party scattered around him. He could feel the humiliation burning in his veins. His species, the Iraq, had ruled the shadows of the galaxy for millennia. No species had ever fought back like this. No prey had ever turned so swiftly into predator. The humans had shown something the galaxy had forgotten, the will to survive at any cost. His communication screen flickered to life, a figure from the Confederation Council staring back at him with cold, detached eyes. "Report, Zikral." He hesitated, his pride shattered, his words hollow. "We miscalculated." The figure on the screen didn't flinch. "The humans? They are not what we thought." Zikral's voice was barely a whisper, the admission cutting deeper than any wound. They are far more dangerous than we imagined. The figure remained silent for a moment before finally speaking. Then the galaxy will need to prepare. Zikral's eyes narrowed, a shudder running down his spine. Prepare for what? But he already knew. The humans wouldn't stop with victory on their homeworld. They were advancing, learning, and evolving faster than any species the Confederation had ever seen. And now that they had tasted blood, they would never stop. On Earth, as the first human ships began to leave the atmosphere, carrying their newfound knowledge and weapons into the depths of space, a quiet realization spread among the leaders of humanity. They had not just won. They had been transformed. Colonel Callan stood in the center of the command room, looking at the maps, the plans, the projections. The galaxy had once classified them as prey. That mistake had cost the Iraq dearly, and it would cost the Confederation even more. "We're coming for them," he muttered under his breath, a dark smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The era of hunting was over. Now, humanity would become the ultimate predator.